So I've got a concern. As in the first class, I was very fast. So I will try my level best to go slow and to use simple English that all of us can understand. So we started our presentation, and the purpose of our presentation was to answer two questions. And the first question, we wanted to try and understand who are the prophets. And the second question, what is the role or the job function of these prophets? So we started to try and understand who are these prophets at the end of the world. But before you understand who are these prophets at the end of the world, we went back to the natural stories, because a parable contains natural stories to teach us spiritual stories at the end of spiritual life at the end of the world. So we went to a Bible passage in the book of Amos, chapter number 3 and verse number 7, to try and understand who are these prophets. So when we read the book of Amos, chapter number 3, verse number 7, God is going to say that for surely God will do nothing except He reveals His secrets, and these secrets are going to be revealed upon the servants, and these servants are the prophets. So before we understood what God meant in the book of Amos 3:7, went back to Amos chapter number 3, verse number 1, to try and understand how God is trying to convey His message. So if you read verse number 1, God is going to say that I have so many families on earth, but I know only one family, and that family is Israel. So if you read verse number 2, God is going to do something against Israel in verse number 1. So God has something which is against Israel. And verse number 2 is going to answer the question, why is God against Israel? And verse number 2 is going to say, because Israel has committed iniquities. So God is going to be to go against Israel because Israel has committed iniquities. And verse number 3, God is going to say, can two walk together except they agree? So you cannot walk two of you unless you agree. So Israel and God had entered into agreement that they're going to walk together. And you can see it clearly in the book of Exodus chapter number 19. When God is going to enter into agreement with Israelites. And Israel and the family, which is Israel, they're going to answer all the things that God has said they're going to do. So they enter into agreement with God. But come in between Egypt and where Amos is standing, already Israel is committing iniquities. So God is going to use parable from verse number 4, verse number 5, and verse number 6. Verse number 4, God is going to use a parable of a lion. Verse number 5, God is going to use a parable of a bird. And verse number 6, God is going to use a parable of a trumpet. So in verse number 4, it's going to give us this scenario that can a lion roar in the forest when it has no prey? Or can a young lion cry out of the den if it has nothing to eat? So if you come to these verses, the previous verses, God cannot come against Israel if they are not committing iniquities. So if you come to verse number 4, God is going to use this parable of a lion, bird, and trumpet to help understand why God is against Israel. Because they have done iniquities. Now if you jump to verse number 7, God now is going to say, for surely God is going to do nothing except reveal his secrets upon the prophets. And I say these secrets is equal to judgment. Because if you read verse number 6, God is going to say, can a trumpet be blown upon the city and people fear? And the people won't fear? So these sermons are going to be raised by God to warn Israel of the judgment that's going to come. Why? They have committed iniquities. Now, before we understand what these prophets are done of the world, we need to go back to understand who is the ministry of Amos. So we went to the book of Amos chapter number 1. And the Bible is going to tell us that Amos is going to do his ministry when Uzziah, the king of Judah, is ruling, and while Jeroboam II of Israel, northern kingdom, is ruling. So have Uzziah here, and have Jeroboam II. Jeroboam II. So Amos is standing here. And God is going to say that God is going to raise his prophets in this history to warn God's people of the judgment that's going to come because of the iniquities. So even before God brings judgment, God is going to raise up his messengers to warn God's people of the judgment that's going to come. So you see Amos is standing here. But we went to another Bible passage, the book of Hosea, chapter number 1, verse number 1. And we see also Hosea is standing here. And also Hosea 1:1. Hosea is going to do his ministry when Uzziah is ruling in the southern kingdom. And Jeroboam II in the northern kingdom. Okay, so we went again. We saw also Isaiah standing here. But Isaiah is going to do his ministry while Uzziah is ruling. Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah. So these are the kings of Judah. So Uzziah is the king of Judah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah. So we saw that Uzziah is corresponding with who? Jeroboam II. So the question that we ask ourselves is, Hezekiah is going to be equivalent to who in down here in the east of the northern kingdom. So we saw that while Hezekiah was ruling the southern kingdom, Hoshea was the one that was ruling upon the northern kingdom. And we know Hoshea is the last king of the northern kingdom, where God is going to take Israel into captivity and is going to use the kingdom of Assyria to take them to captivity. So Jeroboam is the first king, is the first of the last 7 kings. Hoshea is the last. So in between Jeroboam 2 and Hoshea, we have 7 kings. And between Uzziah and Hezekiah, we have 4 kings. But we know God uses numbers to reveal his secrets at the end of the world. For God will do nothing except to reveal his secrets. So this movement, we have been teaching about the number 4. And the primary evidence of the number 4, we got it from the book of Leviticus. Leviticus chapter number 26. And Leviticus number 26 is teaching us the progressive destruction of the kingdom of Judah. So we see the number 4 can teach us progressive destruction. That was the primary evidence of the number 4. But also the number 7 can teach us precious things at the end of the world. So the number 7 can teach us about completeness, or the truth about the 7 thunders. So I'm going to use the progressive destruction, the symbol of the 7 thunders. So we said, in between here there are 7 kings. So I wrote these 7 kings here. So Jeroboam was the first of the last 7 kings. So you have Jeroboam 2. Then the next is Zechariah. Then after Zechariah, I think it was Shalom. Then the 4th one, Menahem. The 5th one, I think is it Pekah? Pekaniah. So we have Pekaniah. Then we have Pekah. It's the 6th one. And we have Hoshea, who is the last king of northern kingdom. That's going to bring the end of the northern kingdom. Because the kingdom of Assyria is going to come here. So these 7 kings, they're going to teach us truth about the 7 thunders. And as a movement, we've been teaching the truth about the 7 thunders for a very long period. And Ellen White is going to tell us that the 7 thunders are delineation of events that transpired under the first and the second angel. So Ellen White is going to tell us the history of the 7 thunders transpired under the history of the Millerites. So this is the history of the first angel. And the second angel is going to take us to the close of probation. So you can learn the truth about the 7 thunders here. So remember, Isaiah is standing here, Hosea, and Amos. Spiritually, they're standing at the time of the end. You have here the 7 kings here. So they're standing at the time of the end. Now, who are these prophets that God is saying? Before God brings judgment, God is going to raise his prophets. And we know at the time of the end, 1798, God is going to raise William Miller. And William Miller is going to understand the prophetic word. So the companies that are going to join William Miller, all these companies are going to become the symbol of the prophets, to warn God's people of the judgment that's going to come. But we know that the history of the Millerites is the alpha history of the modern Israel. But we have the Omega. which is the history of the 144,000. And our time of the end is 1989. So also this is the history of the 7 thunders. So what God is trying to teach us is that the prophets that God is raising at the time of the end is 1989. According to these structures. So the movement that God is raising here is the movement of the 144,000. So God is going to raise this movement to warn God's people of the close of probation that is coming before destruction. And these are the prophets. But we went back to the book of Isaiah, and we saw Isaiah that is going to do his ministry in the reign of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah. And these 4 kings are going to line up with the 7 kings of the northern kingdom. And if you read the book of Isaiah chapter number 28, God is going to pronounce a war upon Ephraim because their leaders have been overcome by wine. And because the leaders have been overcome by wine, also the followers have been overcome by wine. So God is going to bring an overflowing scourge or overflowing storm to bring judgment. And this came in the time period of when Hoshea was ruling. But God is going also to warn Judah that if you're not going to hearken, if you're not going to learn of the northern kingdom, if even you also are going to apostatize, I'm going to bring also the king of the north to bring to bring judgment upon you. So if you read the book of Isaiah, I think 28 verse number 7, if I'm not wrong, God is going to say, they also have erred. This Judah, the southern kingdom, they follow the footsteps of the northern kingdom. And because of that, God also is going to bring an overflowing scourge, which is Babylon. But if you read verse number 8, God is saying that the priests and the prophets, if this is the way, they have come out of the way. And the Bible is going to say that the priests, and we have the prophets, that the priests, the prophets, they err in vision, and the priests, they stumble in judgment. So we ask ourselves a question. What do prophets see? Visions. So we saw that we have a prophetic chiasm here in this passage. That prophets see vision, and the priests, they preside over judgment. So we have something like this. This is the prophetic mirror. So because these people have erred, God is going to replace them. But remember, Isaiah is standing here in this history. So that means if you come to the time of the end, there are those people that who are acting as a priests and prophets. But because they are out of the way, God is going to replace them. And we know 1989 is preceded by the time of darkness from 1863. So in this history, God has trusted individuals here to be priests and prophets. But because they were out of the way, come in 1989, God is going to is going to replace these priests with other new priests and prophets. And we can prove in 1989, we begin the reform line of the 144,000. and also the reform line of the priest. So that means from 1989, God is raising prophets and priests to warn God's people of the close of probation or the judgment that is coming, that they may prepare. So we have answered the first question. That was the recap that was doing. Come in 1989, the prophet that God is raising and the priests is also in this room. So that means we have a big role to play at the end of the world. And that takes us to another question. What is the role of the priest and what is the role of the prophets at the end of the world? Because we are required to understand what is the role of the prophets. Remember, in this history, the priests and the prophets, they were out of the way and they were replaced. That means if you come to this history and you do not understand your job function, the best thing that God can do is going to replace you. And now this is going to lead us to the next question. What is the role of the priests and the prophet that God is raising from 1989? But before that, we see in this history, prophets were seeing literal vision. So if you come to this history, we cannot say that these prophets are going to see the literal vision, because this is a natural story. Try to help us to understand the spiritual story. So I believe this vision is the understanding of the prophetic word. So that means for God to trust you to be a priest or a prophet, you are required to understand the prophetic word. Because it's this prophetic word that's going to warn God's people of the close of probation that is going to come. So if you don't understand your role here, God is going to replace you. Are we together? So let's try to answer the next question. What is the job or the role or the role of the priest or the prophet at the end of the world from the time of the end? But we know at the end of the world, we know there are three groups that are going to be tested at the end of the world. We have the priests, we have the Levites, and we have the Nethinims. So the priests, who are these priests? So we know the priests and the Levites comes from God's church. And the Nethinims, they're going to come from the world. So what does it teach you? That God is going to give two invitation calls in God's church. First the priest, then the Levite. After that, God is going to reach his hand to call which people? The Nethinims. So in short, we have the reform line of the priest. Begins in 1989. And at 2021. So this is the history when the priests are being called by God. Then the Levites is from 9/11 to the Sunday law. I think so. Then the Nethinims from 2014 to the to the close of probation. So in this history, God is going to reach first the priest in this history, then the Levites, then the Nethinims. So I'm going to do a basic study. Remember, our question is after we have identified that God is raising the prophets in this history, we want to try and understand what is the role of the priest. failure to understand your role or your job function, you're going to stumble out of the way and you're going to be replaced by the Levites. Are we okay? So who are these priests? So the priest, after God has gathered the priests in this history, so the message goes first to the priest, the Levites, then the Nethinims. So the message is going to the priest here. So the priests, they teach themselves in this history before they go to the Levites, before they go to the Nethinims. And before they go to the Nethinims, in this history, the priest must train themselves in the priesthood before they go and harvest the Levites. So if you don't understand your job function here, it's going to be too late. And what Elder Pamina was doing, we know this is the close of probation 2019, and 2021 is the second coming for the priest. So this is the harvest. But the harvest for the Levites is from 2021 to the Sunday law. So this is the harvest. So this is the time period that we're going to call out the Levites. But what Elder Pamina was saying, why is it that we are not harvesting we have a long period from 2019 to 2021 before we go and harvest the Levites? And the answer that he gave is because in this history, God's people are not ready. So the priests are not ready. So God must do a work, or the priests must do a work. They must make their ways right with God here. In terms of the message, before they go here. But before they go here, they must understand their role. Let's go to the book of Matthew. So even before you go to the book of Matthew, so I can wrap this. So we know we have the reform line of Moses, and we have the reform line of Christ. This is the Alpha history, and this is the Omega history. Okay. But also, so this is the ancient Israel. But we have modern Israel. So the Alpha history is the Millerites. The Omega is the line of the 144,000. So for you to understand, because we know the reform line of the 144,000 is the Omega history of the modern Israel. And Christ's history is the Omega of the ancient Israel. So we can gather precious gems from the reform line of Christ to teach us how the reform line of the 144,000 is going to look like. So let's go to the book of Matthew to try and understand what the disciples failed to understand. Because by us understanding this, it's going to teach us to understand what is going to happen in the reform line of the 144,000. So let's go to the book of Matthew. Matthew chapter number 10. A familiar verse. Verse number 1. It's going to say, and when he had called unto him his 12 disciples, he gave them power against unclean spirit to cast them out, and to heal all manner of sickness and all manner of disease. So we have Christ here and his disciples. To the spelling of the disciples. Anyway, so we have Christ here and his disciples. So Christ is training his disciples, because we know this is the reform line of Christ. And we know, as we have said, this history can teach us precious history can teach us precious stories in this history. So you know Christ is going to train his disciples first. Then the gospel is going to go to Israel and Pentecost. So I can symbolize this at 3000. Then at 34 AD, the message is going to the Gentiles. But before, the priest or the disciples, they do work here. They had to understand the role that you are supposed to do here. Because failure to do that, they could not participate in this history of calling the Levites. So the same thing is going to happen at the end of the world. So when it comes to our history, the message is going to go first to the priests, to the Levites, then to the Nethinims. So this is the harvest of the Nethinims. Now let's go to the book of Matthew chapter number 10. So let's jump to verse number 5. So verse number 5 is going to say, these 12 Jesus sent forth and commanded them, saying, go not into the way of the Gentiles, or into any city of the Samaritans, enter ye not. Before the disciples reached the Samaritans or the Gentiles, they have a specific work to do. And the next verse is going to answer, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. So that means the message must go first to the church, then to the Gentiles. But so Israel here is going to be likened by like a lost sheep. Remember, our question is, what is the role or the job function of the priest when they come to the time of the end? But before we understand, we need to understand the reform line of Christ, because this is the alpha, the line of success. And this is the line of success. So Christ is telling the disciples, don't go to the Gentiles, but go first to what? To the lost sheep. And this lost sheep is what? Israel. So we have a sheep here. So can we have a sheep without a shepherd? So if you have a sheep, we must have what? A shepherd. But this sheep is in which condition? Lost condition. Why is it that this sheep, which is being likened by Israel, is lost? What is the job function of a shepherd in the literal natural story? I have two job functions. There may be more. One job function of a shepherd is to take care of the sheep. So that it may not be attacked by the enemies. The second job function of a shepherd is to take the sheep to the green pastures. So when you read the book of Matthew chapter number 10, wherever the shepherd is, has failed the job function. Why? Because this sheep is what? Is lost. So a shepherd can be a symbol of the leadership. And you're going to prove that. So God is trying to tell the disciples, wherever this leadership is, they have failed their job function. So what is Christ trying to do? To raise a new leadership, which is the disciples. So I can do this. Let me grab this first. So I have new leadership. Which is Christ and his disciples. And let me say the old leadership. And I'm going to prove this old leadership is the Pharisees. Okay, so the Pharisees are going to prove they are failing their job function. So what Christ is trying to do is to try to arouse the disciples to the new job function. And one of the functions is to do what? To take care of the sheep and to lead the sheep into the green pastures. But unfortunately, the history of the Christ is going to take a long time for the disciples to understand their job function. So hold your hands in the book of Matthew chapter number 10. Let's go to the book of Matthew chapter number 23. To prove that the Pharisees were a symbol of the leadership. Matthew 23 verse number 1. Verse number 1 and verse number 2. Then spake Jesus to the multitude and to his disciples, saying, who? The scribes and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. So we have a seat here. And who? This seat belonged to who? To Moses. But now he's sitting upon this seat. The scribes and the Pharisees. Now is it literal sitting? What Christ wants us to understand, what was the job function of Moses? To lead Israel. Now who has been given the job function of leading Israel in this history? The scribes and the Pharisees. But these Pharisees, they are what? Have made the lordship to be done what? To be lost. And because of that, God is going to raise a new leadership, which is the disciples. But you're going to prove, even the disciples, they're going to take a lot of period of time before they understand their job function. So let's jump to verse number 23. 23, the book of Matthew. So 23 says, woe unto the scribes and the Pharisees, hypocrites. So one of the characteristics of the Pharisees, they are hypocrites. Who is a hypocrite? Is a pretender. Who is a pretender? I believe a pretender is someone who have two characters. He's bad, but wants to be seen that he's good. So these are the characteristics of what? The Pharisees. Hypocrites. If you get time, go and read the whole book of Matthew chapter number 23. Christ is going to say these people are also blind. But remember, It's the Pharisees that have made this sheep to be lost. Now we have new leadership, we have old leadership. So we have two things. So what can we do? We can juxtapose, then we compare and contrast. Now, if the Pharisees are hypocrites, is Christ and the disciples hypocrites? No. So these people are not hypocrites. If the Pharisees are blind, is the Christ and disciples blind? No. Because Christ is training the disciples to do these two job functions. But now let's go to the book of Matthew chapter 5 and see something. As we bring this to a close. Matthew 15 and verse number 1. It says, Then came to Jesus scribes and the Pharisees, which were of Jerusalem, saying. So we see the scribes and the Pharisees are symbol of the old leadership. Jump to verse number 7. He hypocrites. The same thing in the book of Matthew chapter 23. Verse number 8. These people, who are these people? The scribes and the Pharisees. Sorry. These people draweth nigh unto me with their mouth, and honoureth me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. Verse number 9 is the verse that I want. But in vain they do worship me, teaching. So the job function of the Pharisees was to do what? To teach. But they are teaching what? The commandments of men. So the Pharisees, if the Pharisees are teachers, and they're teaching the doctrines of men, what is Christ and the disciples teaching? The doctrines of who? If you contrast, the doctrines of God. So the Pharisees, they're teaching the doctrines of men, and Christ and disciples are teaching the doctrines of God. But now Christ wants to teach the disciples something. But the disciples, they're not going to recognize that. So let's jump to verse number 13. If you have time, go and read the whole book of Matthew chapter 13. Let's start from verse number 12. Then came his disciples and said unto him, who is the him? Jesus Christ. Knowest thou that the Pharisees were offended after they had this saying? So the disciples are going to tell Christ that the Pharisees were offended because you said to them that they teach the doctrines of men instead of the doctrines of God. But Christ wanted to teach them something. Verse number 13. But he answered and said, every plant which my heavenly Father has not planted shall be rooted up. Verse number 14. Then let them alone. They be blind leaders of the blind. And if the blind lead the blind, both shall fall into the ditch. So in this history, what Christ was trying to teach the disciples, that the Pharisees have been bypassed. Christ is trying to teach the disciples their role. But if you read the book of Matthew chapter 15, even the disciples themselves, they do not understand their job function of being what? Teachers. Now, remember, the history of Christ is the omega of the ancient Israel. When come now to our history, if this is the history of Christ, And this is the history of the 144,000. It's going to take a very long period of time for the disciples to understand their job function. So that means the same thing is going to happen here. We have already proved from 1989, God is raising new priesthood, new prophets, and they're being symbolized by the disciples. But the job function of the disciples did not understand their job function. Yet Christ was teaching them. When it comes to our history, the disciples is a symbol of the priests. From 1989, God has been trying to train us to realize our job function. But we've taken a long period of time like the disciples. So if I do this, so this is the line of the priest. This is 1989. We have 9/11. We have 2014. We have 2019. And we have 2021. I know this is our harvest. We are under harvest time. But from 2021 is the harvest of the Levites to Sunday law. So, like the disciples, they didn't understand their job function. It's going to take them a very long period of time to realize that. When it comes to our history, the disciples are a symbol of the priest. We have taken a long period of time not realizing that God is trying to prepare us to harvest the Levites before we go to the world. So we have come to realize in this history of 2029 to 2021, we are not harvesting the Levites. Why? We are not ready. Or we are not in harmony when it comes to the messages. So like the disciples, I think this history is trying to teach us that even us, we are late like the disciples. Because we are in this history, 2021 is few months ahead of us, but even we are not ready like the disciples. We have not realized our job function that the Lord has called us to do. So God has given us this opportunity to prepare us to be what? Teachers. Like the who? The disciples. So from 2019 to 2021, what Christ is pleading to us, if you're a man, even women, God has given us this opportunity to train ourselves to be teachers in this history before we go and harvest the Levites. Then you go to the Nethinims. And this comes to the study that Elder Paminda did in the morning about women. And how Elder Tess and Elder Paminda, they're saying that in this history, 2029 to 2021, even the women have a role to play at the end of the world. Because if you learn the line of progression, the priests, they're not only men. The priest is composed of men and women. So in this history, majority of the teachers were men. But what God is trying to teach us is that even the women are being needed to be teachers. And you have few short period of time for you to prepare to be a teacher. And that's why I think it's solemn when it comes to this history, how women also they need to be serious. Because we are far late like the disciples. But we thank God there is this still opportunity for us to train ourselves to be teachers. And this goes more so to women. If you're given a chance to present, don't be coward. And men, we need to support ladies and women that they have a short period of time to prepare themselves to be teachers before we go together and harvest the Levites and goes to the Nethinims. So it's my prayer that the women and men in this room, they're going to recognize the role or the job function the Lord is calling us to do. We are in the period of the increase of knowledge before we reach Concord. We just have few months for us to do that work. How I pray that we may recognize this message as solemn, that we have a work to do. And this is the time women are not supposed to be shy. If you don't understand any question, go to a brother who understands the message, or the elders who are here to clarify for you, because God is preparing for this job function in this history. So summary, we are trying to labor who are the prophets at the end of the world. And for us to understand who are these prophets at the end of the world, we have gone to the natural stories. The age of Amos, the age of Isaiah, the age of Hosea. And we prove that the prophets, God is raising them from 1989, even the priests. But it's not enough to understand that the prophets are being raised in 1989 and the prophets. We need also to understand the job function. Remember, the reason why we read in the book of Isaiah, the main reason why the priests and the prophets were replaced, they erred in vision and they stumbled in judgment. So the same thing may happen in our history. God wants to be teachers in this history so that we may go and reach the Levites and the Nethinims. I pray that all of us may participate in this holy work that God has prepared for us. Let's pray. Our dear Father who art in heaven, we thank you so much because of your faithfulness upon our lives. Thank you because of how you've been leading this movement since the time of the end. We are about to reach the end of the journey, but we still have a lot of work to do. In the time period of the dispensation of 2019 to 2021, there is a need of preparation that we need to do ourselves as priests, men and women, to be in harmony before we go and reach to the Levites and to the Nethinims. I pray that these privileges and these opportunities, we may be able to utilize them well, that in this camp meeting that we've been having, we may be able to take them serious, because there is a serious and precious work that we prepared for us to do. I pray that you may help us to sink even upon our minds, and more so, ladies and women in this room, that they may be able to understand they are not inferior, but God is raising them also to do our work even at the end of the world. And even as men, give us courage that we may be able to support them, that they may be able to be superior teachers, that they may be able also to participate in this great work. Bless us all, and still ask for the blessing throughout this camp meeting, as he has started today till the end of the Sabbath, for we pray in faith in Jesus' name.